Magandang araw mga ka-aerial defense, may ibabahagi na naman ako sa inyo dahil ngayong araw na ito ay may bagay tayong pag-uusapan. 5 barko ng Pilipinas hindi nagpatinag sa 37 barko ng China. Pero bago tayo magpatuloy, wag mo muna kalimutan mag-like, share, and subscribe. Paki-follow at like muna ng aming page na nasa description na ang link. 37 barko ng China sa Ayungin Shoal, West Philippine Sea tinapatan ng 5 barko ng Pilipinas, at tila kahit isa sa mga barko ng China ay walang nakapigil sa mission ng Pilipinas sa Ayungin Shoal. Sinabi ng Philippine Coast Guard o PCG na nag-deploy sila ng 3 barko nila para mag-assist sa resupply mission ng Armed Forces of the Philippines sa BRP Sierra Madre sa Ayungin Shoal, West Philippine Sea. 244-meter multi-role response vessel ang itinalaga ng PCG at isang pinakamalaking barko nila na 77-meter multi-role response vessel na BRP Melchora Aquino. Ang mga barko ng PCG ay ginamit upang maihatid ang supply ng payapa at ligtas sa BRP Sierra Madre. Nag-escort ang mga barko ng PCG sa 2 supply boat ng AFP.
Of the National Task Force West Philippine Sea, under my direction as the Commandant of the Philippine Coast Guard, I deployed 3 Philippine Coast Guard vessels to assist in the rotation and resupply operations of the Armed Forces of the Philippines to BRP Sierra Madre in Ayungin Shoal. These vessels include 2 44-meter multi-role response vessels, namely BRP Sindangan and BRP Cabra, as well as the big ship that we have, the 97-meter MRRV, BRP Melchora Aquino. These Philippine Coast Guard vessels facilitated the safe and secure delivery of provisions to our brave service personnel stationed in Ayungin Shoal, and that was yesterday. The Philippine Coast Guard vigilantly escorted the supply boats utilized by the Armed Forces of the Philippines to transport essential provisions and supplies to our troops aboard BRP Sierra Madre. They were successful in completing the mission yesterday, despite attempts by 5 China Coast Guard vessels and 28 Chinese maritime militia boats to recklessly harass, block, execute dangerous maneuvers in another attempt to illegally impede or obstruct a routine resupply and rotation mission to BRP Sierra Madre. Further, the Philippine Coast Guard and the Armed Forces of the Philippines closely monitor the presence of 4 People Liberations Army Navy vessels, including a hospital ship, a corvette-type vessel, and a missile boat within the immediate vicinity of Ayungin Shoal. Together with the National Task Force West Philippine Sea, the Philippine Coast Guard condemns once again the China Coast Guard's unprovoked act of coercion and dangerous maneuvers against a legitimate, lawful, and routine Philippine rotation and resupply mission to Ayungin Shoal. It has put the lives of our personnel at risk. The systematic and consistent behavior of the China Coast Guard vessels do not align with the universally accepted behavior of Coast Guards. Ironically, they are supposed to ensure safety of life at sea, but they have deliberately violated the Convention on the International Regulations for Preventing Collisions at Sea, or COLREX, of 1972, to which the People's Republic of China is also a signatory state. The dangerous maneuvering, such as shown by the Chinese Coast Guard vessels, are illegal, reckless, and irresponsible actions that puts into question and significant doubt their narrative of law enforcement and their identity as Coast Guard organization. The Philippine Coast Guard, on the other hand, has acted responsibly, consistent with operational rules based on international law and other IMO conventions that aligns with a peaceful and rules-based norm among Coast Guard organizations in the region. Our Philippine Coast Guard keepers made sure that despite the reckless actions of their Chinese Coast Guard counterpart, they were able to avoid collision between them. And despite their provocative actions to deliberately prevent our vessels from completing the mission, the Philippine Coast Guard keepers maintained their professional behavior and firm resolve to avoid escalatory actions. As the Commandant, I am proud to note that the collaborative efforts and unity of purpose between the armed forces of the Philippines and the Philippine Coast Guard demonstrate our government's collective determination to assert our sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction in the West Philippine Sea. The Philippine Coast Guard is proud to have supported and will always be ready to support the armed forces of the Philippines in its effort to sustain our presence in Ayungin Shoal. The Filipino people is rest assured that the Philippine Coast Guard will remain unflinching in performing these roles in the missions of the Philippines to support its outposts in various features in the West Philippine Sea on a regular basis in cooperation and in collaboration with the armed forces of the Philippines as members of the National Task Force West Philippine Sea. These missions are part of the Philippine government's this is part of the Philippine government's legitimate exercise of its rights and obligations and administrative functions consistent with international law, including the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, the 2016 Arbitral Award, and the Philippine domestic laws. In closing, let me reiterate that the Philippine Coast Guard will not be deterred from implementing the President's explicit guidance for the Philippines to exercise our legal rights and over our maritime zones, including Ayungin Shoal, which form part of our exclusive economic zone and continental shelf. End of my statement.
At tagumpay naman ang kanilang naging misyon kahit na pilit silang tinataboy at hinaharang ng 5 Chinese Coast Guard vessel at 28 Chinese militia vessel upang pigilan ang kanilang misyon. Namataan din ng PCG at AFP ang presensya ng 4 na People's Liberation Army Navy vessels na nasa Ayungin Shoal din, isang hospital ship, corvette-type ships, at missile boat ang tila sumusuporta din sa Chinese Coast Guard. Hindi naman pinabayaan ng Amerika ang resupply mission na ito ng ating PCG at AFP, dahil nagpadala din sila ng military aircraft doon upang bantayan ang ating mga tropa doon. Kinundi na ulit ito ng ating gobyerno ang ginawang pagharang at pagbomba ng tubig sa mga barko natin, pati na rin ang pagpapadala ng China ng kanilang navy sa lugar. Makikita nyo naman na kung gaano karami na Chinese vessels ang hinarap ng ating PCG at AFP upang ipaglaban ang ating karapatan. At talaga naman kahit isa sa mga barko ng China ay walang nakapigil sa ating mga tropa na ituloy ang misyon. Tagumpay ang naging misyon ng ating PCG at AFP kahit na napakaraming hamon ang pinagdaanan nila bago maabot ang BRP Sierra Madre. Isa lamang ang ibig sabihin nito kundi malakas ang loob ng ating kasundaluhan at may tapang sa kanilang mga dibdib.
To start with, the Philippine Coast Guard vessels deployed 3 Philippine Coast Guard vessels, BRP Sindangan, BRP Cabra, BRP Melchora Aquino, and then for the supply boats that the Armed Forces of the Philippines use, we use the motor launch Kalayaan and the Unaiza May #1. The first leg of the mission, we actually departed from Buliluyan Port. The 44-meter vessels came from there, and of course, the 97 meters has to travel all the way from Puerto Princesa. And then, of course, right after their first destination is for them to proceed to Escoda Shoal or Sabina Shoal, because that's the location we called as the staging area, wherein we're going to wait for the 2 supply boats to arrive. And right after their arrival, they're expected to. Our responsibility is to act as security escorts for this supply boats as they proceed to Ayungin Shoal with a distance of 40 nautical miles. Around November 10, midnight, the first China Coast Guard vessel that we documented who was already doing shadowing activity against MRB 4407 is the Chinese Coast Guard vessel 3303. So this is the first time that we were able to document the presence of the Chinese Coast Guard within the vicinity of Escoda Shoal or Sabina Shoal. Around 5:53 in the morning, at vicinity of Ayungin Shoal, we can see that the Chinese Coast Guard 3303 that we first sighted around midnight from Escoda Shoal has shadowed us all the way going to Ayungin Shoal vicinity waters. In this video, we can also see the second China Coast Guard vessels that second Chinese Coast Guard vessel that appeared, China Coast Guard vessel 21551. From the video, you can see that it attempted to separate the Unaiza May 1 and motor launch Kalayaan from MRB 4407. For those who didn't join the mission, I would like to mention that MRB 4407 has the primary responsibility of escorting Unaiza May 1 and motor launch Kalayaan because MRB 4409, our original plan is for her to proceed ahead of the contingent to preposition herself in the entrance of Ayungin Shoal. Around 6:02, the China Coast Guard 21551 is still insisting to attempt the separation between Unaiza May 1 and motor launch Kalayaan from MRB 4407 at a very close distance. Still the same plan from China Coast Guard 2151 is to separate Unaiza May 1 from MRB 4407. At 6:15 in the morning, at a distance of 11.5 nautical miles from Ayungin Shoal, China Coast Guard 21556 made a dangerous maneuver and totally blocked MRB 4409. Almost at the same time, the China Coast Guard 3303 also conducted dangerous maneuver to block MRB 9702. At 6:25 in the morning, the Chinese Maritime Militia vessel 00225 attempted to block Unaiza May 1. And then in this particular time, sunod-sunod na to, starting 6:27, you can see that the Chinese Coast Guard vessels and Chinese Maritime Militia vessels are already conducting dangerous maneuvers to make sure that the Coast Guard vessels will be corralled. Starting at 6:27, MRB 9702 was corralled by the Chinese Coast Guard and two Chinese Maritime Militia vessels. And at 6:30 in the morning, 3 minutes after 9702 was corralled, you can see that MRB 4409 was also surrounded by the Chinese Maritime Militia and the China Coast Guard vessels. At the same time, MRB 4409 was also corralled by the Chinese vessels. They deployed two Chinese Maritime Militia vessels and two China Coast Guard vessels. Around 7:07, we can see that China Coast Guard vessel 3303 and Chinese Maritime Militia vessels are already increasing its speed because for those media and journalists who boarded 9702, you can already tell in your story that MRV 9702 increased its speed to make sure that she can be able to get away from the attempt to corral her and to immediately reach the destination in Ayungin Shoal. At around 7:26, the China Coast Guard 21551, totally black MRV 4407. This is actually the reason why MRV 4407 has been separated from Motor Launch Kalayaan when she was water cannoned by China Coast Guard 5202. So for those of you who would like to ask why Motor Launch Kalayaan is all by herself and where's a Philippine Coast Guard vessel, would like to go back to the previous slide. It's because MRB 4407 was totally blocked by China Coast Guard 21551. That resulted to the separation of Motor Launch Kalayaan. And then right after she was separated, the China Coast Guard vessel 5203 used her water cannon against Motor Launch Kalayaan. Around 8:18 until 8:25, the first supply boat that arrived inside the Ayungin Shoal is Motor Launch Kalayaan, and then it was followed 7 minutes after by Unaiza May 1. It is worth noting that since 3 Coast Guard vessels were able to reach the entrance of Ayungin Shoal, we were able to at least use our cameras to show that the Philippine Navy has also deployed their rubber boats to counter the China Coast Guard aluminum hull boats that they deployed coming from China Coast Guard vessel 5203. So our Philippine Navy personnel using their rubber boats were very effective in ensuring that the Motor Launch Kalayaan will be able to come near BRP Sierra Madre. So as you can see, the 3 rubber boats launched by rigid-hull inflatable boats launched by the Philippine Navy is leading the way as Motor Launch Kalayaan is also being protected and escorted by these rubber boats. There are a total of 6 rigid-hull inflatable boats that the Philippine government deployed to ensure the security of Motor Launch Kalayaan and Unaiza May 1. For each Coast Guard vessel, we deployed 1 rigid-hull inflatable boat. That makes it 6 for 3 RIB from the Philippine Coast Guard and then 3 from LS-57 or the Philippine Navy against the 3 China Coast Guard vessel RIBs or aluminum boats rather that they use in running after the supply boats that we deployed. These 2 supply boats around 9:35 already successfully moored alongside LS-57 to unload the supplies and provisions that are needed by our troops on board the BRP Sierra Madre. Around 12:20 in the afternoon, Motor Launch Kalayaan and Unaiza May 1 already went out Ayungin Shoal and have already completed the unloading of its supplies. It is worth noting that the Philippine Coast Guard vessel 9702, when she departed Ayungin at a very not so distant Panganiban Reef from Ayungin Shoal, she was still shadowed and dangerous maneuver were still conducted by China Coast Guard vessel 3303 towards MRB 9702. The entire resupply contingent, composed of the two 44-meter vessels, the Unaiza May and Motor Launch Kalayaan, arrived Skoda Shoal around 1700 or 5 p.m. last November 10. As you can see from the photo, we still documented the presence of the Chinese Coast Guard vessel, who also still shadowed us from starting from Ayungin Shoal until we arrived Sabina Shoal. These are the 5 monitored Chinese Coast Guard vessels who actively participated in blocking operation against the Philippine Coast Guard vessels and supply boats. China Coast Guard vessel 21551, China Coast Guard vessel 5203, China Coast Guard vessel 3033, and the China Coast Guard vessel 21551 and 21556. With regard to the aluminum-hulled boats that they deployed, we can see that the China Coast Guard vessel 5203 has deployed 2 aluminum-hulled boats, and one aluminum-hulled boats were also deployed by 21555 and 21556. For the Chinese maritime militia vessels who actively carried out dangerous maneuver and blocking operation against the Philippine Coast Guard vessel, we have 6 Chinese maritime militia vessels who never really hesitated to make sure that their blocking operation will be very successful. That is 00210, 00225, 00110, 00301, 00229, and 00112. With regard to the PLA Navy vessel, we were able to monitor these 4 Chinese maritime militia, PLA Navy vessel rather, PLA Navy 530, PLA Navy 539, and Hubei Pass attack craft. And we also monitored the presence of the PLA Navy hospital ship, PLA Navy 862. Then the total number of the Chinese vessels that we detected during the resupply operation, there were 16 Chinese maritime militia vessels that were physically monitored, and there were 12 Chinese maritime militia vessels that were detected through their AIS, and 5 China Coast Guard vessels, and 5 People's Liberation Army Navy. In total, we can say that there are a total of 38 Chinese vessels who were present within the vicinity of Ayungin Shoal during this particular resupply operation. For the PRC's actions against the Philippine Coast Guard vessels, these are the radio challenges that BRP Sindangan, BRP Cabla, and BRP Melchora Aquino did to challenge the presence of the China Coast Guard vessels and Chinese maritime militia vessels. And then at the same time, we also listed the number of times that they were challenged by the China Coast Guard vessels. These were also the Chinese maritime militia vessels who participated in blocking the Philippine Coast Guard vessels, as shown in the slide. For the dangerous maneuvers, these are, we have listed 6 dangerous maneuvers that were conducted by the Chinese Coast Guard vessels against the Philippine Coast Guard vessel. That ends our...
Para sa mas madaming update tungkol sa ating defense, abangan lamang ang aking mga bagong video. Para naman sa mga gusto magpa-shoutout, mag-comment lamang po at share, paki-follow at like muna ng aming page na nasa description na ang link. Huwag mo na rin kalimutan mag-like, share, and subscribe. Pindutin mo na rin ang bell para updated kayo sa aking mga video. Maraming salamat po.